Hey, howdy. You know how last episode I said I was super excited to be done with the race season and was looking forward to just riding for fun for a while and not worrying about training at all? Well, I've kind of done something stupid.
Oh, let me guess. You've signed up for another race, haven't you?
Ding, ding, ding. Yep, got it in one. It's not just a little race either. I've just finished registering for the 25 hours in Frog Hollow, November 2nd. It's just a couple of weeks from now.
So I gather at least this is like part of a relay team. You're going to share the workload?
No, there are 2-person and 4-person and 8-person relay divisions, and I've signed up for solo. I've actually done this race solo before, and it is just terrible. It is going to leave me wrecked for weeks afterward, I guarantee it. I do not know why I keep signing up for these things. It may be time for me to admit I have a problem.
Yeah, it's a small one. Well, that might be a topic for you to discuss with your therapist. Meanwhile, you may want to put in a good size order with our presenting sponsor, Floyd's of Leadville. Considering the amount of exhaustion, pain, and swelling you're in for, Floyd's CBD could make a huge difference in getting you back on your feet.
Yeah, I'm on it. I've made that order already, and I am planning actually to use Floyd's Recovery Mix during the event. I will let you know how that goes.
Good. Floyd's of Leadville is our presenting sponsor and friends of the Leadville podcast. Get a great discount on Floyd's products. Just go to floydsofleadville.com and use the code FATTY at checkout for a 15% discount on your first 2 orders.
And as always, thanks Floyd's of Leadville for sponsoring the show.
3, 2, 1.
Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race presented by Floyd's of Leadville. It's season 2, episode 26 of the show that breaks down, builds up, gets you ready, and freaks you out for the highest and hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country.
This episode, we are talking with Chris Smith, who raced Leadville for the first time in 2019, and it's a celebration of strength, willpower, and independence 10 years after he was declared legally blind.
Yeah, we were lucky enough to meet Chris in Leadville this year, and to hear his whole race story on this show is a real honor. We're going to get to it in just a minute, but first, we want to give a shout out and thanks to our sponsors for this year's show. First, The Feed. Of course, they fueled us through the whole season, and in fact continue to do so as Fatty and I continue to race into the autumn with the Morton Drink Mix. Be sure to go to thefeed.com and use the code Leadville15 for a 15% discount on Morton Drink Mix and gels.
And another sponsor we love, Shimano. Hottie, whether I am riding the XT Di2 drivetrain or the brand new XTR, I gotta say, it is the most easiest, confident shifting I have ever had on any bike, and I've got it on really all of my bikes that aren't single speeds. It's just quick, it's clean, under any load, multiple shifts, up or down. Just head on over to bike.shimano.com to learn more. Get a drivetrain that you love.
Yeah, I've been hanging out there quite a bit lately because they also have a cool new gravel group set out, and I've been kind of examining parts a little bit. Banjo Brothers has also been with us since the very beginning of the show, and we're big fans of their tough, practical, and affordable bags. Get 15% off your saddlebag, commuter bag, frame bag, phone wallet, and other bike bags. Go to banjobrothers.com/fatty-favorites.
And finally, Envy. I have 4 mountain bikes, and Envy wheels, stems, bars, and seat posts are on every single one of them. That is no coincidence. That is because I trust their incredible strength, the way they look so good. They're just beautiful. And of course, the lightness they bring to their premium bike wheels and components. Check them out at ENVE, that's envy.com.
Once again, big thanks to all this season's sponsors of our podcast, which of course is presented by Floyd's of Leadville. And now let's welcome our guest, Chris Smith, to tell us his story of racing his first Leadville 100, 10 years after being declared legally blind.
Chris, welcome to the show.
Hi there.
It's great to have you here. I have to say that you have as close to a superhero origin story for this for the Leadville 100 as anyone I have ever talked to. Also, you are a friend of a friend. You and I are both good friends with Jeff Diefenbach, who is a Leadville nerd like me, and a great crewman. You and I have both been lucky enough to have him as our crew. So I got to say, when he introduced me to you and we were just sort of sitting around a fire a couple of nights before the race, it was fantastic to hear how you got to the Leadville starting line and the journey you had to get through there. I'd like you to share that with our listeners.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, so I guess backing way up to a long time ago now, one day I was driving through the streets of Cambridge in Massachusetts, and I saw this weird thing in the road, and it kind of looked like a little industrial turtle. And as I drove by it, I realized it was a pedestrian crossing sign, and all I had seen was the very bottom of it. I thought that was kind of weird, and so I went to the eye doctor, and they sent me to, they did tests and more doctors, and pretty soon I was diagnosed with a disorder called Stargardt's disease. And it's a degenerative retinal condition where basically the rods and cones that receive the light in my eyes are dying off, and I'm getting blind spots. And over time, just more and more of them died off, and blind spots grew, and I ended up with essentially central vision loss.
So you have peripheral vision, but not a lot more than that. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's about right. So if I'm sitting across the table from someone and I'm looking at you, I won't be able to see your face, your shoulders, your body, but I would be able to see the walls behind you, the ceiling. I'd probably be able to see there's a clock there, but I wouldn't be able to tell what time it was. So I can see the general world around. I just can't see detail or what I'm looking at directly in front of me.
Yeah. So at the time this started happening, and even more so as you got further into this and your vision became increasingly bad, were you mountain biking at all then? I mean, were you a mountain biker who was losing vision, or were you just a guy who was losing vision who had not yet started mountain biking?
So I grew up in Connecticut in the 80s and so, and I had an old Western Auto mountain bike that I used to take out and hit the trails. And then when I went to college in Boston, I brought my mountain bike up there, and I used it for city riding and occasionally hitting trails around the city. But it largely collected dust. By the time that I was diagnosed, I still owned the thing, but I wasn't really riding it much.
Right.
And then, as I started to lose my vision, I said, look, it's bad enough just getting around in the world. There's no way I'm going to ride a bike, or I'm not going to be, certainly not going to be mountain biking again. That'd just be crazy.
You are, just to sort of get a time set here. So you were declared blind, I guess, legally blind. When?
That was in 2009, 10 years ago this year.
Okay. And so, 10 years ago. And you weren't a rider. I mean, what did you do for exercise?
Nothing. I was I was a big guy. I stopped weighing myself when the scales tipped over 300. And I did a lot of
And you're about
driving,
how tall?
5'10". So
okay, yeah. So
not
300
not in
pounds,
great shape.
5'10". It's, I mean, yeah. And I mean, that's something to, I mean, obviously, or maybe, I shouldn't say obviously. You what was your journey from being essentially blind and weighing 300 pounds to saying, I'm going to do the Leadville 100?
Well, one of the fortunate things about the way I've been hit with this is it came on pretty slowly. From that first day that I noticed it till the point I was declared blind was 9 years.
Okay, so you had some time to kind of learn and adapt.
Exactly. And so, when the day I was declared blind, as the state sent a social worker to my house and said, let's start on a journey. And he talked to me about, how I needed to learn Braille, how my life was going to change. And he, presented me with a white cane and said, you need to start learning to use this to get around. And, I'm not at the point where I need something to help me get around. And I was kind of in this weird loophole where, I had too much vision to really qualify for a lot of the like paratransit stuff that we have around here. But, obviously my license was taken away at that point.
Right.
And I'm in technology, so I was able to use, assistive technology to keep working. So now I was in this place where my office was, a little over 3 miles away. And I could still do my job. I just couldn't get there. So I went and by that point I had picked up some other bike along the way because I'd sold that mountain bike because I figured that was never going to happen. So I went into the garage and I picked up an old hybrid that I had, and I went out and I rode to the office. And that first day was tough. It was a little over 3 miles with a couple little hills. And I had to stop and rest a few times because I just couldn't make it. And over the next few weeks, I started doing this more and more often, and my legs were hurting all the time. But I kind of what I had to keep doing is either that or just call it a day.
Yeah, I use the cane and walk, I guess. But I mean, so your vision was not so bad that you needed that you couldn't ride, but I assume that as you continued to ride, that probably helped with weight and fitness. But I mean, meanwhile, your vision is continuing to degrade. I mean, how does the balance of that? How does that balance work?
Well, I'll tell you, I hit a lot of potholes. I hit a lot of. I got a lot of flat tires.
I feel terrible for laughing right there. No. I mean, I wouldn't have laughed if you hadn't laughed there. But I mean that sort of presages the fact that you just rode the Leadville 100.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more than potholes there. So I mean, what you were learning there is kind of in a very small way what you were doing in Leadville just a couple of months ago. So explain how did you learn to ride without a lot of vision?
Well, I mean, so from years of having ridden when I was a kid and from driving, I was familiar with the road and everything around it. So, it was a matter of just going slower. And, I guess to that end, I was so big and out of shape that it wasn't really an option to go too fast. So it was a limiting factor.
Sure.
But it just kind of, I joke about hitting potholes, but, for me, especially at the beginning, there was a few times there where I almost ran into the back of parked cars because they're right in front of you and you're worried about all the stuff around you and not necessarily, I wasn't looking right in front of me because it's hard to see that. But over time, I just acclimated to it. And as I got stronger on the bike from commuting, some friends that ride early in the morning invited me along, gave me a shot at trying to keep up with them. And, I did the best I could, but I found that the more I rode with them, the easier my commuting was. And then the more commuting I did, the easier the recreational riding was. And the whole thing kind of snowballed. And, there's no easy way to describe what it's like to ride. It's just, it's a constant scanning. I'm never I can never really relax on the bike. I'm always on alert because I'm always, I never know. I can never trust my eyes. So,
right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, if the story just ended right here, it would still be an amazing success story as far as I'm concerned, right? You went, you overcame a real difficulty, the primary sense I use to get around on my bike, and, with severely degraded vision and being pretty overweight, you kind of dealt with both those things and you started riding, and I think that's awesome. But you've obviously taken that a lot further. We wouldn't be talking right now.
Yeah.
How did you get from being a commuter who is getting some fitness and I assume losing some weight to being someone who had taken up the mountain bike and said, I'm going to go do a super hard mountain bike race?
Well, so I got back into when we moved to a place that had, or I guess I was in we lived there already. There's some trails out behind my house that are pretty tame for most people. They're walking paths essentially. And I sat here looking at them like, I used to really enjoy riding off road. I'm doing okay on road. I really would like to give it a shot again. And so I picked up essentially the same bike I had when I went to college, off of Craigslist for a couple $100. And I went out into the woods and tried it and hit a bunch of stuff and crashed a bunch, but it was still fun. And I enjoyed it. And it was great to have, it was great to be out off the roads. It actually, there was a shortcut to my office, so I could take the trails to get to my office. So it was fun, and just kind of decided to keep going with it, and bought an old full suspension bike, and that was even more fun. And I rode other local parks around here and had a good time. And finally, when 29ers came out, that was a eureka moment for me. All of a sudden, if I have a bike with bigger tires, I can hit more stuff and not go over the handlebars.
Roll over stuff. You're right.
And so, cut to Leadville. I have a 150 mil Scott Genius with a 29er wheels on it, and which is way overkill for that race.
For most people, yeah. I mean, that's a nice enduro or trail bike, but for you, it's important.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You need to roll over stuff most people would try to probably go around.
Yeah, exactly. And it's given me a confidence that I've been able to hit things that, and it's not a big deal. I don't go flying off the handlebars or something, and I can, just let it rip at times, and it's great.
So there are a couple of things that I sort of want to scan backward a little bit. First of all, we still haven't really addressed the, why the Leadville 100, and then also, I am, looking at you, I wouldn't necessarily guess what your weight is, but I know for sure it isn't 300 pounds.
Yeah, right. So as of the day of the Leadville this year, I was 230.
Mm-hmm.
So
a big loss. That's awesome. Okay.
Yeah, and boy, that helps your power.
Oh, for sure.
If you train, with that sort of weight and then you drop it, it does wonders. But
your power to weight ratio definitely goes up. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. And but why Leadville? What made you choose to do that race out of all the many races that you could choose?
Well, so I had, over the last 10 years, I've been taking on bigger and bigger challenges, and I've been looking for, the next longer, harder thing to try, and, to prove to myself I could, and, kind of give myself that motivation to keep working. Mm-hmm. And with the 10-year anniversary of being declared blind, I was looking for something that was, bigger than what I've done before. Yeah. And you mentioned our friend Jeff, and, I can't tell you how many times he's fantastic. He gives me, obviously I can't go to bike events on my own unless I'm riding there. He's awesome at picking me up and bringing me around and helping me get to these things. And I can't tell you how many times hanging out with him, Leadville would come up just with random people, or he'd see something. So, and he had done it in 2015, and so I didn't really know what it was back then, and I kept hearing about it, and then I used to listen to this podcast called The Paceline, and I had a couple guys on it, and they broke off to go do a podcast entirely about this one race, and I'm like, man, if there's, yeah. And I'm like, okay, if there's, if I'm out here in the East Coast and I'm hearing about this thing just randomly all the time, and it's big enough to have a podcast devoted entirely to it, it seemed interesting. And then, the final nail in the coffin was, I went to go look into the lottery, and I found that there were charity options, and that the Challenged Athletes Foundation was one of the charities that I could ride for. And that
makes sense.
Yeah. So, throughout my journey from this whole thing, I've been really fortunate that I've had, the support around me, like, Jeff and a dozen other people who will go out of their way to pick me up. My family's really encouraging. And, I'm fortunate enough to have the financial means to go out and buy an awesome bike for this thing.
Right.
And not everyone does. And, we've laughed a lot about some of the, hitting potholes, stuff like that, but there's been some real challenges, some real dark times too. And so I know what it's like, and how cycling has really helped me, deal with this and give me an outlet. And, CAF helps other people that may not have the opportunities I have and the resources I have those opportunities and get to that start line. And it's really just a wonderful cause. So,
I love the full circle nature of that you took, that you did this for a cause that is very near and very personal to you. So that is a fantastic way for you to have gotten into the race, to do a little bit of paying it forward, right? I love that.
Yeah, it's really just, and the people there were awesome, fantastic. They're so welcoming, and so many. My story is nothing compared to some of the people there and what they're doing.
Well, it's not like it's a contest. It's awesome that you got to the starting line, and it's awesome that you were supporting a cause that is very meaningful to you. Do that. So let's go ahead and with all of that in mind, let's flash forward to the race. So you were in which corral?
I thought I was going to be in white because I didn't do any of the qualifiers and, nothing to bump me up, and I hadn't done it before. I found out a couple days before that was in blue. I don't know how that happened, but it was like winning the lottery. So that was great.
Hey, yeah. It's like, sometimes it's best not to ask questions.
Exactly.
Right? Okay. So you were at the starting line, and gun goes off, and normally I would probably say, well, let's zoom forward to the first climb. But for you, it's one of the parts of the race that has always been a little bit wiggy for me has been the first few miles of downhill, when there are a lot of people zipping in and out and around and to your side and kind of close, and people are yelling and asking you to move and get out of the way for a line. The first couple miles is crowded and dodgy and downhill and fast, and you don't have great vision. How was that for you?
It was actually, Eldon, I was with you on that. I was, I think, more fearful of that than it was of Columbine or Powerline, for exactly the reasons you mentioned. I don't know what happened, but I ended up in a group of people that were just chill and awesome, and we'd all just move down the hill, and there's just no drama there.
That's so good to hear.
Yeah, I think I may have been passed by a couple of people. I think I passed some other people, but just nothing happened. It was wonderful.
So yeah, you didn't have people cutting you off or anything. That's awesome. You can, at different places in the race, you will find, at some point you're going to find someone who is who's going to become a friend, or someone who is, the person you're going to be riding with all day. It sounds like you kind of found that group of cool riders very quickly, and that's awesome. That's super fortunate. So you were able to get to the pavement pretty, without drama and without particular difficulty. Of course, there's a lot of people funneling into St. Kevin's Climb. How'd that go for you?
So I ended up being over on the left-hand side of that dirt road leading up to it, and someone passed me off on kind of in the gutter or in the weeds on the side as we were all marching along like cattle. And I said, "Hey, wait a minute, that stuff over there is better than half the stuff for my ride today." So I popped out and followed him, and just.
So were you walking or
no,
you were
riding.
still on your bike? Okay,
yep.
Gotcha. When you said marching, I was picturing you off your bike, but no, you were still riding. But so you're just kind of going off, getting off the dirt road and just sort of bushwhacking a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, it wasn't that bad,
Yeah.
but it was good enough, and managed to roll right along and pick up a ton of places. And by the time I got to
oh, really? You were
Stephen,
passing people there?
Oh, sure.
This wasn't just a line. This was a good line then.
No, this is awesome. This is. I shouldn't even say anything, because if you ever do it again, I'd love to just hop out there. No, yeah, it was like a super passing line. It was great.
Okay, fantastic.
And so by the time I got to St. Kevin's, I don't know what heavens parted, but I managed to clear it. There's a couple little incidents around me, but I kept my feet clipped in and rode right on up. In
really?
fact,
Didn't have to put a foot down on Kevin's. Forget vision issues. That's a great ascent for anyone.
Yeah, I totally lucked out.
Yeah.
Actually, I didn't even put a foot down until Twin Lakes.
No kidding.
No.
Wow. Okay. So that means you had not just a great Kevin's, but you flew nicely along to Carter's, and then there is the pavement, and that is downhill and fast. And I got to say, as you probably already know, and probably a lot of our listeners know, the one time that I DNF'd on Leadville was not on any technical part, but when I had my head down and the road turned and I didn't, and I shot off the left side of the road.
Yeah.
So it was when I wasn't looking carefully, and I have reasonable vision. I mean, nothing special, but it's good enough, I would have thought. But so, I mean, that is a fast paved downhill. Were any nervousness there, or was that more in your comfort zone because you've done a lot of paved riding?
Yeah, and I do a lot of mountain biking these days too.
Yeah.
And I actually love going fast. And although I can't see anything, that's not, I
Maybe
guess,
there's a lesson there. Maybe I see too much.
Well, or the other way around. Like, I'm never not paying attention.
Yeah. See, that's exactly it. That you are used to constantly scanning what's ahead. Whereas, someone like me, I'll sometimes kind of disappear into my own little pain cave, and am not necessarily paying as much attention, and maybe not seeing as much as you are. So, I mean, it's actually a great point.
Yeah. No problems on the descent. In fact, that was a breeze. And a lot of it, the descents was great because so much as leading up to it was I had to be so careful, and I didn't want to injure anything. By the time I got to race day, all pressure's off. You could just let it rip, and if I crashed, then I crashed on race day, and that sucks. But at least it wasn't preventing me from trying. So there's a lot of pressure off, and I think I took 8 minutes off my power line descent from the day before, or a couple days. Now, before.
I wanted to ask about your power line descent because, of course, that is a pretty fast, and there's a lot of surprise turns, and there's some there is. Some pretty chunky lines that you see a lot of people pinch flatting on every single year there. And it sounds like you didn't. I mean, the fact that you didn't have to put a foot down till Twin Lakes means that you didn't have any problems there. But even before then, before you come down power line, there's the Sugarloaf climb, which is one of my favorite climbs. I mean, it's Hadi and I've talked about this many times, that it is, in my opinion, kind of the brightest spot of the day. I love the Sugarloaf climb because you feel good, and it's kind of you're just sort of starting to get into your race day groove. But it is one of the more technical climbs of the day, and I thinking about you and having to ride with peripheral vision primarily, when you hit something that is, and I understand, just kind of bombing the downhill stuff and letting your suspension do the job. But on climbs, you hit something, a big rock, it seems like that would kill your momentum and send you off your bike. I'm curious, how do you cope with those kinds of obstacles? The big chunky rocks that are, real momentum killers.
I mean, try to go around them. But
sure.
No, I mean,
so are you able to see them?
Yeah.
To some degree? Okay, great.
And when you're climbing, everything's coming up a lot slower, and you got a lot more time to process, what's in front of you. And there's some help again from being really heavy and training and losing a bunch of weight. I'm able to push over some of that stuff. Not too bad. And I'm with you. That Sugarloaf climb is beautiful.
Yeah,
it was great.
Yeah, I love that climb. Okay, so you had it sounds like your day. I mean, your day so far is just a textbook perfect race day. You've had an amazing Kevens. You've had a great Sugarloaf. You've had a great power line descent. Still haven't had to clip out. So that makes me think that you did not stop at the pipeline aid station. You just rolled through and kept going. Were you riding with a Camelback or bottles, or what were you doing as far as fueling and drinking goes?
Yeah, so I had a Osprey Camelback with Morton's, somewhere between Morton's 160 and 320 in it.
Good call.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. There you go. You just did our sponsor spot for the feed. Nice work.
Yeah, no, it was good stuff. I trained with that, and it was great. And then I did goo every 30 minutes. I had the timer set up and was able to stick to that pretty religiously.
Very nice.
So yeah, I planned to roll through pipeline and did exactly that.
Terrific. And I'm curious, of course, as you're riding, are you more or less keeping the fact that your vision is impaired to yourself, or are you asking questions of other riders, saying, "Hey, let me know when if there is if I start to drift off the course, or if I turn left when I should go right, or if I don't see one of the course markers or something like that." Are you asking your fellow racers for cues, or are you just relying on whatever existing course awareness you had?
So I did some pre-rides the week before that helped a lot. And Jeff there helped show me around. He showed me around to some of the spots, so that was a big help. I mostly relied on, there's other riders around. I went and talked to them and asked them, but you could see where someone is up ahead. And then Wahoo came out with a large print GPS. That's awesome. Their new Element. It's a monochromatic display with big chevrons, and it's really easy. I mean, reading text is one of the hardest things for me to do. And so GPSs have been pretty much useless except for post-ride analysis. But this one is big enough and bold enough and simple enough that I can actually see where the course is. And for the first time in years, I can look ahead on the map and see where I'm supposed to go, or if I'm actually off course. Yeah,
very
that's
nice.
good.
So you're using the Wahoo Element? I know that the original Element has a pretty big screen. Is that the one that you're using then?
Yeah, it's the same. It's the new one that came out this past year, the Rome.
Okay.
And it's the same size screen as the old one, but it's shinier, newer.
Right. Yeah, and like you say, it's a high contrast, monochromatic, big screen, which is important. And you can, of course, you can use that big screen to fit a lot of data, or you can use that big screen to show a little bit of data real big, which is fantastic for you.
Totally.
So, yeah, awesome that is out there, and good on you for sussing that out. So let's get back to the course. In my mind, I am picturing you now through the pipeline, and you are headed to. You now have to. About what time did you get through pipeline? Do you remember? how long did it take you to get to Twin Lakes from there?
To be honest, I don't know.
Okay.
Again,
no, that's okay. You don't.
Yeah, the GPS is, although it's easier for me to read, it's still not easy.
Sure.
So I kind of made a pact to myself that, look, I'm just going to go out there and ride, and if someone stops me because I'm not making the check marks, then so be it. Otherwise, I'm not stopping until someone pulls me or I hit the finish line.
I love that thinking. I have a good friend who made a point of never riding with a GPS. And he said, you just go as hard as you can. Does a GPS make you any faster? No, it just makes you more anxious. So in your case, I mean, it also provides meaningful map data, which is valuable.
Yep.
But yeah, just you're going to go during this race the best that you can. And I don't think anyone is going, oh, I go harder, but my GPS is telling me not to. But so, okay, great. So you're not worrying about time. You were just going, and you were going at a race pace. Awesome. So unless you have something super exciting to tell me what happened between Pipeline and Twin Lakes, let's go to Twin Lakes. You're stopping for the first time, seeing Jeff, who is crewing for you there.
Yep.
And what happens from there?
So Jeff was awesome. He had me in, out. I can't thank him enough for coming out and doing that.
Right.
And then headed on out from there, feeling great. That first section of Leadville 100 was one of the best rides I've had, and I can't remember how long. It was just, everything was awesome. It was great. And then Columbine. That's where the day kind of flipped on the head for me.
You're not the only one that is true.
I know. But I was kind of an idiot. So around here, there's Mount Washington is the biggest hill climb around. And it's 7.3 miles and 4,500 feet of climbing. And I've done that a couple times. And so I know how to do that ride. I love that thing. I love to, attack at certain places and sit back in other places. And so looking at the numbers, Columbine is like a mini Mount Washington. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to attack this thing and it's going to be great. And, I learned my lesson. There's a big difference between, Mount Washington, the ride starts at the base and ends at the top, and it takes you an hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever it takes. A big difference between that and starting 45 miles in. And the other thing, if you were standing at the base of Columbine, to get to the top of Mount Washington, you'd have to dig a 3,000 foot hole. So there's a little difference in the altitude there. And both of those, came up and bit me. And next thing you know, I was, on the side of the road, still down the gravel path, watching people go by, catching my breath and trying to get my wits about me.
So you were literally off the bike, or you just felt like you were like not going anywhere?
I'd ride for a while, and then I'd have to stop, catch my breath and settle down, and then, fire up again and go, and kind of start this ride stop cycle.
So were you starting to worry that, I'm not going to make it, or did you have any awareness of where you were as far as the clock goes, or were you just, still determined? I'm curious where your head is at this point.
I didn't know what I didn't know.
Right.
And I hadn't pre-ridden Columbine. So, again, back to that mindset, I'm just going to go till someone stops me. And Jeff had told me I was in great time. I should figure out what it was, but I think I was in pretty good shape there. And so, I was certainly cognizant at the time. I was very frustrated that I wasn't able to get on and ride the way I wanted to.
I will tell you, by the way, while you've been talking, I've pulled up your results, and you actually don't have a time for Twin Lakes outbound. That's the only one you don't have a time for. So I'm not too worried that you got in a car and got a ride there. But I will say that it looks like you were that you got to Pipeline at 2 hours and 31 minutes, which is very good. So from Pipeline, I would bet less than an hour or approximately an hour. So you were probably 3.5 hours.
And I was lucked into
as you get to Twin Lakes.
Yeah, I lucked into a huge line out on the pavement too, and so we cruised right across that. So,
oh yeah, okay, great.
Yeah, so
taking you back to Columbine Climb, and you're having a rough time, and you're still on. Have you got to what we call the goat trail yet, where you basically break out of tree line, or break through tree line, and you can suddenly you're at very high altitude. You're at about 11,500 feet, and this is where everyone starts having a rough time because the pitch goes up, the trail becomes rockier and gravelier, and most of us can see the turnaround point. That wouldn't be a factor for you, but it would. But it is, maybe that's a good thing because it's really demoralizing to look and see how far and how high that turnaround looks.
Yeah, ignorance is bliss. It is great. There's, I could tell you the scenery is beautiful. The hills, even as deep and dark places you can get in, you can still look around and it looks just amazing. But I certainly couldn't tell, where things were very far ahead. So yeah, no worries about being demoralized for that.
Okay. But so you're riding sometimes, you're walking sometimes, and you manage to get to the turnaround. Do you know what your turnaround time is, or would you like me to tell you?
I did roll through the turnaround and then stopped on the top of the pitch afterwards and did look then. And I remember saying, I'm halfway and I'm, halfway through the time, and I got to pick it up a bit. And that's when I started really worrying about time. So your turnaround, according to the mat, is 5 hours and 56 minutes. And that is right on the bubble. That would be, it's not at all a bad thing, but you were certainly cutting it close, whether you knew it or not. So that's exciting and kind of scary. Yeah. It's definitely motivating.
How'd the descent down Columbine go for you? There's, a lot of, sweeping big turns and a couple of hairpins. Were you able to see well enough that you could get through and around those without any trouble?
Yeah, no problem. And in fact, there was someone that was out ahead of me and, acts almost like a rabbit out ahead that I can, hang back a little ways and follow. And, And so I could tell when they're about to go around the corner, and that means I'm about to go around the corner. And actually had a great time on that descent. That was fun.
Yeah. So having someone in a bright jersey or something that high contrast that you'd be able to pick out and use as as essentially, like you say, a rabbit as your carrot it must have been very helpful. So you got down Columbine, and I assume that you're feeling better at this point, or are you able to eat again, drink again, or is your stomach still a problem?
Yeah, so no, on the way up, the stomach wasn't a problem. And on the way down, I was all right. I'll tell you though, after that though, is when the stomach did become a problem. And it was.
I was just going to say it's a rare person who doesn't have some kind of GI issue at some point during the race where your stomach is going to knot up one way or the other. That is a hard thing to nail, and a lucky day when you can.
Yeah. And so what happened, at Twin Lakes, it was, another quick pit stop and back on the way. And it was right after that, I think even on the single track, where my stomach started to go south. And I just felt nauseous and I really wanted water. And unfortunately, the Morton's, as great as it is, and I, love the stuff. At that time, I was so thirsty, I just wanted water. And, I would drink some of the Morton's, and that added to the nausea, and this kind of cycle of thirsty, drink, nausea, thirsty, drink, nausea.
I think it's worth making a point that I'm a user, I'm a fan of Morton's, but and I think this is worth noting, I don't think it has ever been the only kind of fluid that I carry, because sometimes. And this is true of any kind of energy drink, you get tired of it, or your stomach just kind of does a flip-flop and it makes a connection that the drink is the cause or the gel is the cause. And it doesn't really matter if it is actually the cause. Your mind has made that connection and you have a hard time getting it down from that point. It is good to have some water on hand so that you at least don't get dehydrated if that becomes the case.
Yeah. And I think, so I did have a bottle. It just wasn't enough. And, if I had to do it over again, I think I switched Camelbacks and Jeffrey filled it at Twin Lakes while I was doing Columbine.
Okay.
I think I would keep, the drink mix in the Camelback up and water in a water bottle up through the second Twin Lakes. And at that point, swap it and have 2 liters of water and some energy drink in the bottle as a supplement.
Not a bad idea. I have found that for any kind of energy drink, that when it gets warm, that is when the day gets warm, and therefore the bottle or the Camelback gets warm, energy drink of any kind, when it gets warm, somehow becomes super unappealing. Whereas water is still fine, right? You can drink water at any temperature without it being bothersome. So yeah, you definitely, that's something you find out only with experience, what you can tolerate, how long into what ride and at what temperature, right? We all learn little things about what we're good at. Only with practice.
Boy, I learned a lot that day.
Yeah. Okay, so you're back through Power Line. Through Twin Lakes Dam. And they have not pulled you off the course, which is great news. It sounds like there was no particular concern. Looking at your times here, there was no concern about that. You came into the Twin Lakes at 6 hours, 38 minutes. That means you bombed from Columbine to Twin Lakes. You did that in 42 minutes, I believe. You rocked it, man. Congratulations.
Yeah,
that is a good fast descent. So you definitely earned back some of the time, and you're back on track for, I won't say a super comfortable sub 12 finish, but certainly you're in the mix. So take us through that final 40.
All right. So after the single track and going through back towards Pipeline was just a mix of, I was having a hard time on anything that went up, and there's more walking than I would have thought that I would do normally. But kind of just kept chugging along. Got into Pipeline, and was pretty thankful for the challenged athlete support there. And I chugged down a bunch of water. Again, I wish in retrospect I had been thinking to dump out the Martins and put water in, but race brain.
Sure.
And so I chugged down as much as I could, and then hit Power Line. And Power Line is was a slog. There was I think I had to get off a couple times before I got to the steep part, on the twisty bits at the bottom, and then got most of the way up the steep bits, and that's when the skies opened up. A thunderstorm rolled in, and
it did.
And you're up there underneath the power lines, and lightning's coming down around you, and the rain was just torrential.
That is terrifying.
Yeah.
Were the power lines making that sizzle sound?
Oh, sure.
They're lightning flash, and then before you even heard the thunder, the gzzzt on the power line overhead.
Yeah, they were humming pretty good. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And unfortunately, due to the mix-up, I didn't have my rain jacket, so I just had this nylon thing that acted pretty much as a collector,
as a wick. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So I'm just every couple of minutes having to dump all the water out my sleeves and dumping the water out of the waistband. But yeah, that was a challenging little section there.
Hey, turned it into an adventure, right?
Oh, sure.
Otherwise, it was just a race.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, by the time I got up to the top and then coming down over the Sugarloaf, it was
Still rainy.
Yeah, it's still raining. It let up quite a bit. But I just remember the Sugarloaf descent just being a river going down. And my hands are pretty numb at that point, so I didn't have great brake control. And so I kind of just said, you know what? I've ridden a stretch before. Probably 1,000 people have ridden it before me today. I can pretty much just let go and hope for the best, and just kind of tore down it. A little blind faith.
Blind faith, huh?
Yeah.
I don't know, pun intended or not.
Totally.
So I will say that you are probably not the only person with severely impaired vision coming down there. All that mud flipping up into other people's glasses. Everyone was, I would say, not necessarily riding with as impaired a vision. So you might have had an advantage there because you were used to it.
Yeah. And though, I mean, I do remember being passed a bunch on that bit. As much as I felt like I was, pushing it, there are other people that were much happier places than I was.
Oh, sure. But you're not really racing them. You're racing the clock, right? You're racing your own objective. So
exactly.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And are you at this point wondering or worrying about where you were in terms of time, or not? Still just going to go as hard as I can, best as I can, get to the finish line when I can.
You got it. That was
Awesome.
Really it. I didn't take the time. I left my GPS in map mode the whole time, so I didn't even bother to look at it.
No kidding. That's awesome.
Yeah. It was what it was. I couldn't go any faster than I was doing at that point. So it was a matter of just doing what I could and finishing as best as I could.
That's a great way of approaching the race. Yeah.
And then I'll tell you, coming down off of Hagerman's, looking out over Turquoise Lake, there was at that point the skies had cleared, and I just remember there was a fog bank over the lake and a rainbow going through it, and it was spectacular. And that it was a great helped the mood a lot, seeing stuff that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so and that's making me think, okay, so you can, through your peripheral vision, you're able to see things like a rainbow and see that, skies are clearing up for you a little bit, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're down off Hagerman's, you say tomato, I say tomato. And then now it's time for the pavement, right? That 3-mile climb up the pavement, and you've got your 87 miles into this race. It's not necessarily the funnest time for anyone. How'd it go for you?
That was the worst of anything. As bad as parts of Powerline were, and it's frustrating because just any time it pitched up at all, I was off my bike. By the time I got to May Queen, I was in rough shape. I'd look ahead and find some goal to ride towards, and 100 yards, 200 yards ahead, and more often than not, I wouldn't be able to make it. I'd do 100 yards, 150 yards, something. I'd have to stop and collect myself, and just pause for a minute, and then I'd start back up, and I'd make another 150 yards and have to stop. And
wow,
it was. That stretch was one of the hardest times I've had on the bike. I was in rough shape, and by the top, by the time I got to the top, when I would stop, I had my head on the handlebars, and I was pretty much convinced that I'll say I was absolutely convinced that when I got to Carteret, I was going to get pulled for health reasons. I was just I was in really bad shape.
You're that bad.
I felt that bad. So,
right.
I felt like I was going to pull over. Like my stomach the nausea was hitting, exhaustion. It all kind of came home on that stretch. And, I thought for sure, but I was also at the same point where, on one hand I had made that pact to myself that I was going to keep going until someone told me I couldn't go anymore. Mm-hmm. And the logistics of it, I had to get to Carteret if they're going to pull me. So I kept going.
I love that. So something that is really interesting about this is the self-perception versus the objective placement, right? That is, you felt miserable. You felt like you were doing bad enough that you were going to have to exit the race. In terms of time, you were right. You got to Carter at 10 hours and 45 minutes into the race. And when, the traditional math for that kind of for that kind of arrival time is you were on the brink of maybe making it to before the 12-hour mark and maybe missing the 12-hour mark, but you weren't in any danger in terms of time of being pulled there. I don't know what their time cutoffs are, but I'm just extrapolating. You were nowhere near a 13-hour finish, and where they start doing cutoffs. And so, I mean, as far as they were concerned, they probably just saw another guy having, another guy racing the Leadville 100, right? And yet another guy who was in the pain cave, one of 1,200 people in the pain cave they had seen in the last couple of hours. So they probably didn't even, I doubt there is anyone at Carter Aid Station who noticed you in particular, or maybe they did. Maybe you really did look as bad as you felt, but I think we've all felt probably as bad as you have felt. So you were doing better than you think, or than you felt you were doing at that moment, I will say.
Yeah. Well, and so when I got there, there's a gentleman that was a volunteer that, just said, "Hey, what do you need?" And, there's no question about, wow, you look like crap. It was, obviously you need something. What do you want? And that guy was awesome. He gave me water after water after water. And then, I had actually been, despite how I felt the entire race, I'd stuck to my glue plan. So that aspect was pretty good.
Good for you.
But after a few minutes, he said, "Hey, what do you think about some salted watermelon?" And that sounded absolutely vile, and still sounded vile. And he got some for me, and it absolutely was vile. And I think I had 2 or 3 pieces of it. And
not salted watermelon goo, but an actual slice of watermelon that had salt. Oh,
exactly, okay. With a lot of salt. It was
a little too
horrible.
much salt.
Yes, but it did the trick. I'll tell you what. So as much as my day turned upside down going up Columbine, at that point, the water kicked in, the salt kicked in, and all of a sudden, I can't remember if it was he said something, if it was another rider, or if I just kind of dawned on me that, hey, the cutoff time is getting close. If I leave now, no one's pulled me. If I leave now, I may have a shot at this thing. And so I headed out. And from that point, it just the day was 108 degrees. I had an absolute blast going down St. Kevin's with those water humps jumps. And then I got down to the bottom of St. Kevin's, and I threw a headphone in and put some loud, thumpy music on, and just started cranking. And then got over to the gutter and played in the mud. Got through that, rounded the corner up onto the boulevard, cleaned the bottom section of the boulevard.
Oh, no kidding! That's not nothing. That is a rough end, especially since you got there after the rain had started, which meant there was, there was a little river flowing down at that point, I would guess.
Yeah, I don't remember, honestly. I remember Scrabbly. There were some other people that were there, trying to get around them and did it.
Nice work.
Thanks. And then the rest of the boulevard, I just pushed. I gave everything I had, and I'd pre-ridden it a bunch of times, and I think I got, I think 4 times I'd done it. I got my second best time on race day. Kind of going along saying, hey, if I push now, I never have to do this again. And the keyword there being have to. Right. I felt like if I didn't make the 12 hours, I would have to do it again. And if I made 12 hours, then I might want to do it again, but I didn't.
Then it's your option. Yeah. So then, so I kept pushing across the pavement,
came around on the crest of the hill and saw the finish line up ahead, and just gave everything I got to get to that finish line.
And I will say that as you came up Harrison, I'm sorry, as you came up 6th Avenue toward Harrison, I was there along with, my wife, Lisa. She was there, a bunch of us who were there, looking for all of our friends and family who were still out there. And, we were, looking anxiously down there. And I see you, and all of us just went completely bonkers. It was so awesome because I'm going to let you say what your finish time was, but we were stressed. And when we saw you, we were so excited. So I don't know if you remember seeing us, but we were there, and we were just over the moon that you were about to cross that finish line.
Well, thank you. There's a lot happening right there. And I didn't honestly know, like I couldn't read the timing thing. So I crossed the line and kind of finished and was like, okay, so
how did I do?
Yeah, exactly. And I'll never forget Jeff. There's a big crowd of people there, and all this chaos going on, and just seeing Jeff bounding through the crowd and yelling, giving me a giant bear hug, and telling me I did it. So I ended up, it was 11 hours, 56 minutes. So I had, 3 minutes to spare.
Plenty of time.
Yeah.
You, and that was the time that it's not like you eased off or like you mashed in looking for, to finish over that. You did it in the speed that you could do it. And it was not just good enough. That was great enough. That was just, it was one of the highlights of the day as far as I was concerned. You killed it. This guy that I had met, the day or two before, and we'd had, it had been great to meet you. I had no idea whether you could do the race or not. It wasn't my place to make that kind of judgment call, but I knew enough about your vision and what, doing this a decade after your vision had, really been more or less, it kind of become, pretty poor.
Yeah.
That you were crossing the finish line in this race. You had achieved everything that you had set out to do, and you'd done it for a great cause. And man, just what a great day. What a great moment.
Yeah. It was definitely a something I'll hold on to forever. Even if I do it again, there'll be nothing like that time and seeing you guys out there and that moment of drama. And it was pretty fantastic.
Oh, and so, I will say that it's exciting to see anyone finish, but to see anyone finish close to the 12-hour mark is somehow energizing and exciting and heroic in a whole different way. And to see you doing this, overcoming a lot of obstacles, a significant weight loss, a significant relearning of how to ride without most of the vision most people have, just amazed and impressed with what you've done, Chris. Incredible story. I appreciate you sharing that with us.
Oh, thank you. It was, it felt like, it was something I set out to do. And through training, equipment, the race day, I felt like I had a plan in place. And in the end, it all, looking back on the whole race and just, we talked about the start and, the pace lines throughout and stuff. And I just felt like everything lined up. And I was so lucky just to have the day that I did. And then the whole experience out there, not just race day, but leading up to it, meeting you guys, and meeting all the other racers that were out there ahead of the time. Just the whole scene, the whole town was just amazing. It's just really such a wonderful experience.
right, let's wrap up Season 2, Episode 26 of the Leadville podcast presented by Floyd's of Leadville. Once again, congrats to Chris Smith on his incredible day, and thanks to him for sharing his story on this podcast.
Yeah, big thanks to him. If you like our show, support it by giving us a 5-star rating and review over at Apple Podcasts. Share it with your cycling friends and support our sponsors. Let them know you appreciate them making this show possible.
Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you at the 2020 start line.